Welcome to Series 5 of the Lassie Lounge podcast. Join me, Katie Taylor, as we talk balancing hormones, busting myths, breaking taboos, boosting libidos, and bolstering confidence. Why not grab a coffee, take a seat, or go for a walk and join us in the Lassie Lounge as we chat all things midlife, menopause, and beyond. With thanks to our friends at Youth and Earth for making this podcast possible. Is it possible to slow down aging? And how can we give ourselves the best possible chance to live a long and healthy life? That's the topic I'm discussing today with TEDx speaker, GP, lifestyle doctor and coach Dr Alka Patel. I first met Dr Alka 2 years ago when I interviewed her for our first ever Midlife Festival. And what stuck with me is her mantra that our health is a skill. And she explained to me that health is not something we're just given, it's something we have to work at. So today we're going to dive into that more closely and hear Dr. Alka's tips for how we can all make compassionate lifestyle changes for a happy, healthy and long life. Well, welcome back, Alka. It's lovely to have you here today.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me back.
So listen, I wanted to start with this concept that health is a skill, as I think it's really important to sort of for women to understand that, you know, health underpins so much of what we do in our everyday life and what we're going to talk about today. So could you perhaps expand briefly on what you mean by that and how it governs your approach to the work that you do?
Oh, I'm so glad you're raising this. So for sure, I think really, if you think about it, most people want health, don't they? It's not something that we can deny. We want health, but it's a bit like, I think I want that dress, or I want that car, or I want that ice cream. I want health. So it's very easy to objectify it. I think it's very easy to think of health as something that you just have. And I know that when I started my medical career as a GP, and that was going back about 25 years ago, I remember thinking that too. I thought I could just give people their health. So what happened very early on in my career is patients would come to see me, they'd drop their health into my lap, or absence of it really, and then they'd say something to the tune of, "Can you fix it, doc?" And which I'd do, and then I'd hand it back. And when I think about what that fix was, usually that fix came in the form of a pill, or maybe 2, or maybe 3. And so before I knew it, I'd become what I now describe as a drug pusher doctor. I've become a drug pusher. And I realized that that's because that's what I was taught. And that is what we're taught in medical school. Of course, there's lots more to it, but what we're taught is to find the very quickest fix we can for the greatest number of people. So what happens is that along come the pharmaceutical industry, they pick up on this, and you end up with this healthcare system that's really largely based on drug interventions, pharmaceutical interventions. But going back to what I realized and what I allude to in my TEDx talk and what you've talked about in terms of health being a skill is that that's not really a fix. You can't fix health with this supply of pills, because health isn't something that you just have. It is something that you do. And I talk about that in the terminology of a skill, because we've all got skills and we've all understood how we've learned something and practiced it and got better and better and better at it, whether it was your first bike that you rode or playing the piano. We've all got memories of that, and we can do this with our health as well. Health is something that you do, but also something that you be. I think doing and being are both verbs. So that's pretty much my approach to health. It's all about taking action. It's all about getting to the root of health, which is all about self-care. So I know we talk about having a healthcare system in this country, and lots of people are talking about, well, it's not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system, which is absolutely right. But what I believe is truly, truly missing is a self-care system. And that's my approach. That's about empowering people to take personal responsibility for their health, and not just responsibility from a sort of place of heaviness, but just cherishing that ownership. Really cherish ownership of your health. And so I do this. This is my approach, is about creating smart self-care for my clients, looking at their health goals, looking at their health challenges across a number of things, whether you want to sleep better or stop sugar cravings or need support through the menopause or to reverse diabetes, or you don't want that title of high blood pressure, or you want to reverse aging. Take a really smart approach to self-care. And what I mean by that is a number of things. One is about really tuning in to your signals from your body and mind, so this sense of this innate intuition that we all have, but also look at the time that we're living in. We're living in an amazing, fascinating time of technology. So use tech and tune into your signals, and that will create this incredible approach to your self-care. And we can talk a lot more about that, I'm sure, as we go on into sort of how moving from that drug pusher doctor to more of a sort of data-driven doctor is what's resulted in amazing transformations, I think.
And it's funny, talking, the way you've just been talking about health, when we're all born as babies, unless we were particularly, born with any inherited, genes that may have meant that our trajectory was going to go in a certain way, most of us are born as healthy babies. And then the way your life pans out as you go from sort of baby into young child and teenager into adulthood will move forward depending on, I suppose, environmental factors, but also what you do with your body and your mind along that journey. And I think as we get to midlife, there'll be a lot of us looking back thinking, well, actually, I completely took my health and well-being for granted. But actually, if I'd done X, Y, and Z, by goodness, wouldn't I be in a better sort of state now? And, and I actually look back at my own life and think, oh, I wish I'd sort of learned to eat better, or I wish I'd learned that exercise could be fun, or to not stress so much. So, and so you get to midlife and you think, oh my gosh, how did this happen? So, I mean, the big question here, what I really wanted to sort of get to is about slowing down aging. Like, what actually does make us age?
Oh, that's a super, super interesting question, because I think the biggest problem that I see when it comes to aging and conversations about aging, Katie, is that most people believe that aging is inevitable. You talk to anybody and most people think, well, we all age, that's life. But there's a problem with having that sort of fixed belief. And the problem with that belief is that you sort of resign to it. You take a very passive approach to aging. But the thing is, aging and getting older are two very different things. I want people to really recognize this, that there is something fundamentally different between aging and getting older. So absolutely, we all get older. That is inevitable. There's nothing we can do about the tick of that chronological clock. We are not here to stop the sunrises and the sunsets of every day. But aging is very different. Aging is biology. It's physiology, it's cells, it's chromosomes. So agree, you cannot change the tick of your chronological clock, but you can change what I like to call the tock of your biological clock. So then getting back to your question, what makes you age and what is aging? Well, there's this theory. There's a theory which is now very widely upheld in scientific communities, in medical communities, and it's called the theory of aging. And the theory of aging is very much about how aging underpins everything. So we look at things like diseases and the diseases of getting older and things like diabetes or heart disease or high blood pressure, and we think that's the disease, but really it's all underpinned by aging. So I'll tell you a little bit about the theory, if that's helpful. I think that it will be, so we can really sort of understand where aging is coming from. So there's 9 hallmarks of aging that occur at very much a biological level. And I say 9, there were 9 until very recently when 3 more were added. So there's now 12 hallmarks of aging. And I won't go through all 12, but I know we've had conversations before, and I know you know how much I love acronyms because they really do help kind of learning and to help ideas to stick and for something for people to go back to. So I do have an acronym for the first 9 hallmarks of aging, and that spells out the word time stamps. And now that 3 more have been discovered, I'm going to have to change the whole thing, aren't I? But for today, it's really easy to remember timestamps. And I won't go through all 9 of them, but maybe just the first 4 that spell out the word time. So in terms of what makes us age, hallmark number 1, T, is for something called telomeres. So what are telomeres? Well, telomeres are these kind of protective caps at the end of your chromosomes, and they protect your DNA. So if you think of something like a shoelace and you've got that little bit at the end, think of it as a sort of protective cap. So what happens is that your cells are always dividing, and every time a cell divides, that telomere at the end gets shorter and shorter and shorter until it reaches that critical point when the cell can't safely divide. So imagine the end of that cap off a shoelace coming off, and then you've got fraying. So there's things that we do in our lifestyle that cause telomere shortening. And you've mentioned a few of those already, things like not exercising well or not eating well, smoking, stress. So as time goes on, if you don't do anything to counteract the loss of the telomere length, then the amount of healthy cells that divide is going to start to decrease and decrease and decrease. And then what you've got is poor cell function and poor tissue function and poor organ function. And all of this, as I said, the results in aging and all the diseases that come with it. So that's hallmark number one, T for telomeres. Hallmark number two is something called instability. So what I mean by instability is instability of your genome. So your genome is your whole set of DNA, all of your genes, and it's got all that information that you need to, in essence, build and maintain you. But if your genome's unstable, it starts to get altered again every time your cells divide. And when it gets altered, your cells are not performing those precise functions. Our cells are very precise, and when they're not precise, of course, all sorts of there's a fallout from all of that. And you can damage your DNA, make it unstable in lots of ways. There's external ways and internal ways. So externally, it's things like radiation and infections and chemicals and toxins. But internally, we're always producing all these byproducts of our normal metabolism, something called reactive oxygen species, ROS. And we've got lots of processes to repair all of this. But if it's insufficient, then all that DNA damage starts to accumulate. And you haven't mentioned sleep yet in terms of sort of midlife, but when you sleep, it's when you accumulate DNA damage. So if you're sacrificing your sleep, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're scrolling on your phone rather than sleeping or watching that one more episode on Netflix, you're really detracting from being able to stabilize your genome. And again, that's going to change your aging trajectory pretty significantly. We'll go quickly into hallmark number three, which is, where are we? TIM is mitochondria. And I love that word, and I love mitochondria. So in very, very simplistic terms, they're like your battery, they're your powerhouse. They've got a whole load of functions, but they're your tiny, tiny organelles in all of your cells. They're your battery. They create all this energy called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And you get these reactive oxygen species when you create ATP. And we need some of them because they're really important for health, but too much, and you get damage. And then as mitochondria start to dysfunction, they're not doing their job as well as they should, then you get a buildup of all of this, and then all those conditions that we traditionally associate with aging, like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. If you think of it, if you've got a faulty car battery, then it's pretty much going to affect every function in the rest of your car. And it's the same with your mitochondria. If you've got faulty mitochondria, then they're going to affect everything else in terms of aging. And then finally, TIME is for epigenetics. So epigenetics is, how can I explain it? So you've got your DNA, which is your instruction manual. So like a book, you've got a book, but you also need some way of reading the book. So sitting above your genetics are your epigenetics. They're your instructions on how to read the manual, which pages are going to come to light. Imagine reading a book with a highlighter pen. What are you highlighting that is great, that you love, that you want to keep going back to? So it's your epigenetics that really switch on and off your genes. And there's lots and lots of lifestyle factors that have an influence of that. So that's just a quick whistle stop through maybe the first four of those what is aging questions from a biological perspective. I've got a whole ebook, Katie, by the way. So if anybody does want to kind of dive deeper into the other 9+3, just drop me an email or message me. I'm very happy to send it out as well. It's not a problem.
Well, that was a fantastic biology lesson. I wish you'd been my teacher at school, because I would have definitely taken note for sure. And we'll put the information about the ebook and everything in the show notes. But I mean, look, let's sort of go down and a bit deeper into what sort of things we can do to possibly slow down aging. Now, I know a lot of us, perhaps suffer from burnout and stress, in this sandwich generation where we're all juggling so much, whether it's aging parents or bringing up kids or holding down a job. And of course, throw into the mix perimenopause and menopause. There's, it is hard to find time to eat well, to shop, to cook from scratch, to get out and exercise and make sure we're doing, getting enough sleep. So what would your advice be in some ways to sort of help with this And when I talk about slowing down aging, there's nothing wrong with aging. We just all want to age well. But, where do you begin? It can be so overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And that stress of I've got to do everything. I've got to go sit under a tree and breathe for 3 hours, and then I've got to go to the gym for another 2 hours, and then that in itself adds to chronic stress, which contributes to aging. So we've got to get away from. And I know I talk about health being a verb, but doing and being, it's also part of how you're being. So where to start? I mean, that's a really, really important question. And I keep going back to the science, and I do want to just highlight this a little bit, because if you know what's going on, you'll find your perfect starting point. So again, if you look at genes, there's lots of genes that are also involved in longevity. So you want to really be thinking about, how am I going to switch on my anti-aging genes? So there's 3, and I'll just give you the names of those without going into sort of too much detail. But there's a gene called mTOR, something else called AMPK, and a group called sirtuins. And when you put them all together and think about, where do I start? How am I going to upregulate the genes that I need and downregulate the ones that I don't? A really, really good starting point is food. Now, I know we talk a lot about food, and we have wars on food. I mean, you've only got to scroll on Instagram and everyone's warring about food. But most people are thinking about what to eat. And I want to divert everyone's attention today on when to eat. And I say this specifically because when you eat directly affects your longevity genes, and we're talking about aging. So the whole conversation about food in other formats in terms of what your end goal is, but when we're talking about aging and longevity and reversing aging, and I also want to point out that you can reverse aging. So we've said, how do you reverse aging? We haven't even clarified that. Reverse it? Can you actually reverse aging? So the answer to that, before we get into food and when to eat, is absolutely yes, you can. So I test biological aging in all of my clients, which is amazing, because you get a number, not the number on your passport, but your biological number, your cellular age. And once you know that, you can then start to look at what's going on in your lifestyle that's going to reverse it, and then remeasure. So you've got something very, very concrete that tells you whether what you're doing is working for you or not working for you. Because again, going back to the Instagram scroll, there's so much that we throw ourselves into doing. How do you know if it's having the effect that you want? How do you actually know? Test and track, so important. So going back to when to eat, fasting and intermittent fasting, it's something a lot of people will have come across. I like to call it time-connected eating. So eating within a time frame, a time window that you feel connected to, that fits with your rhythm of the day. And the reason that this is really important is that when you're not eating, you're in a sort of state of low energy, but in a positive way. And these genes that I mentioned earlier, the sirtuins, this family of genes, are activated. And then they make a fuel that there's a gene that's activated that makes a fuel called NAD, which some listeners will have heard of. And then once all of that gets switched on, your DNA gets repaired. So if I go back to those hallmarks of aging, by fasting, by eating within a time-connected window, by choosing a time to start eating and stop eating, the genes that you need to repair your DNA are activated, which is so important. And also what happens is that Pac-Man comes out. Pac-Man comes out to play, and your listeners will definitely remember what Pac-Man is for sure, right? So this little process is called autophagy, where you're chomping up all the cells that are not doing the job that they're meant to do. They're not functioning so well. You're recycling all your proteins, and all of that expands your lifespan massively. So again, eating within a time-connected window has been shown to activate this process called autophagy, which is great. And then talking about energy as well. I mean, what is life? Life is energy, right? What's being human? It's about energy. So if we're supporting our mitochondria, our powerhouses, to make energy, the more energy you have, the longer you live. There's a correlation. And how do you do that? Feels like a paradox, by not eating. So what I would suggest to people is, if this isn't something you've done before, is think about what feels really comfortable. Have a fixed time for that first mouthful of something to go into your mouth, and have a fixed time for that last mouthful. Start with something easy, 12 hours is relatively easy. Might be a slightly later breakfast, slightly earlier dinner, and then see what you can do. Extend it half an hour every couple of weeks until you get what feels comfortable. 8-10 hours is a kind of a good aim. People do things differently, but all the while know why you're doing it. You're doing it actively to take control of your health, to actually be in charge of your physiology. Yes, you can control your genes. It sounds like crazy. People think genes, I'm just born with those. No, you really do have the power to change things. So go with that mindset that this is a purposeful decision, and let it be part of your rhythm. Find that, tune into the signals that tell you, am I hungry? Is this too much for me? Is this too long for me? Your body will tell you. So I think that's a really, really good starting point. And also what to eat is important as well. And there's so much we could talk about this, but the one thing, again, when it comes specifically to longevity and aging, is sugar. I mean, we could have a whole conversation on sugar, but the most important thing to avoid for aging and longevity is avoiding sugar spikes, the highs and then the lows. And back to what I alluded to right at the beginning, which is having a smart approach to your health. And back to my acronyms, because I love them so much. My smart health plans that I create for people is about strategizing, measuring, analyzing, responding, and tracking. So how this comes into play in terms of food and sugar is you don't now have to guess, should I eat that? Shouldn't I eat that? You can tell. I'm wearing this continuous glucose monitor. I don't know if you can see it. Not because I have diabetes or I need insulin or anything like that, but because I want to understand my own body and how I respond to different foods. So this is how you use technology that is now accessible to your advantage. Because sugar is really important. What glucose does is it shuts off those genes that I mentioned. It shuts off the sirtuins and it shuts off the AMPK. So your defense against aging is minimized when you are actually reducing those highs and those lows. So I think two things there. One is eat less often, and two is kill the sugar. And the third thing is thinking about that plant slant to your food choices, amplify your antioxidants so that you've got all those defense mechanisms in place. And I think it's worth here talking a little bit about supplements as well. And I know, again, whole topic on its own. I can come back and go into depth about my top 5 or top 10 age reversing supplements, because the research on supplements and longevity is incredible now. It's exponential, the amount of information that's available and accessible. And taking supplements to support all those pathways and all those processes that I've mentioned already in those hallmarks of aging, that has to be a win-win. So my usual approach to supplements is very much, again, what I've alluded to: test, treat, and track. So not to just blindly walk into a health food shop or go online and fill up your trolley, but really think about, what do I need? But when it comes to longevity, there are some absolute cores. So my go-to is, well, one thing I personally take myself and recommend a lot as well is something called NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. So what this does is it supports the NAD that I mentioned as part of your sort of energy cycles. It supports the sirtuin genes that I mentioned as well. It stops your telomeres shortening, remember that shoelace that I mentioned earlier. So it's got a lot of benefits.
It's so hard to know how much food is actually going to give us what we're actually missing or need, versus, where supplements will just come into place to really, help boost those, I guess, missing things. I mean, is there any foods that you can get this in, or is it really quite hard?
You can. So in fact, I mean, in terms of where are you getting this in your diet, you're getting what you need ideally from eating colorful foods. So all of that sort of those antioxidants that you need to fight, to put you in sort of defense mode, is really from colorful foods, the polyphenols, etc., etc. So colorful foods and veg, whole grains, healthy fats, all of this makes a difference. And again, directly to your telomeres, it changes what's going on with your telomere length. So it's got a direct effect on longevity and age reversing as well. So I think that's an important point, is that, are you getting enough, and how do you know? And the word is in the supplement. This is not a replacement. This is not, this is my kind of favorite supply of NMN. This is all I'm going to have, and I'll eat what I shouldn't be eating because I'm taking supplement. No, this is supplementary to that lifestyle focus, and that has to come first, in terms of those lifestyle shifts, how you eat, what you eat, when you eat, that comes first. But you're adding a layer because we don't really know the quality of our food. We don't always know what we're getting from every chomp that we take. So I think this is an important field to think about. So yes, I mentioned NMN. Another one is something called spermidine. So that's directly acting on that Pac-Man, the autophagy, and helping you to kind of get rid of the cells that aren't functioning so well for you as well. So those are two of my go-tos, at least. I've got a few others as well. So sort of the bottom of my fridge is where my little supplements sit at the moment. And again, be very purposeful about why you're taking them. Something like resveratrol, which people might have heard of. You find it in red wine. And there's lots of debates about, red wine and its benefits, and we can talk about that as well. But again, from an aging and anti-aging perspective, what's resveratrol doing? It's directly acting on those genes, on those sirtuins that I mentioned. So that it's having a direct effect. Some things can be measured, some things can't be measured. This can't be measured. But once you understand why you're taking what you're taking, it just makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of my positioning on supplements as well. I know Youth and Earth are supporting this podcast, aren't they? And they're certainly sort of my go-to at the moment in terms of what I use as well. So I think definitely worth having a look at that as well.
Yeah, and I think it's great to be having these conversations because it just shows that we're able to take back some element of control anyway over our sort of long-term health and well-being. I mean, you touched on things like alcohol, and you hear people talk about it all the time, that often when life gets very stressful, we turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. So whether it's alcohol or smoking, or perhaps reliant on sort of highly processed foods, this obviously all has an impact. So look, we talked about how it can be very overwhelming knowing where to start, but in terms of creating perhaps small healthy habits, maybe you could sort of share some advice on building those small habits, other than that great tip about sort of eating within a window and obviously optimizing your diet. What else could we sort of perhaps try?
Oh yes, so habits in itself is a huge topic, and I've got a whole module on this on one of my courses, my signature course, because we talk about habits, but then it's like, well, how do I create a habit? If I start something, how do I continue that? Or if I stop something, how do I make sure I stay off it? And there's something that I talk about in terms of layering your habit. So there's a lovely little phrase that I use, which is called "when I will." So if you're somebody who wants to build an exercise habit, for example, and again, the data on exercise and aging and longevity is great. So we talked a little bit about food, but exercise plays a huge part as well. But there's something really interesting about exercise when it comes to aging is you need to think about the Goldilocks effect. So not too much, but it actually is a stressor, significant stressor, because actually exercise is a stress on the body. But we need to think of it as a positive stress. So underpinning sort of longevity and age reversal is this idea of something called hormetic stress, hormesis, which is the stress that doesn't kill you but makes you stronger. And we all think of stress as a very, very negative thing, but actually you can use stress to your advantage. So not too much, not too little, but just the right amount. And exercise falls into that category as well. So if you want to build an exercise habit, how do you do that? Because a lot of people start something and stop it. And we know this, don't we? Look at New Year's and New Year resolutions, and gym memberships go up flying, don't they? And then nobody goes. So use that phrase, when I will. When I wake up in the morning, I will do 10 calf stretches. When I brush my teeth every day, this is what I actually do. I do my calf stretches as I'm brushing my teeth. When I come home from work, I will go for a 4-minute run. So use what you're already doing as a habit that you're doing automatically anyway, because you're brushing your teeth every day, for example. What can you add on to it that you want to create your new habit on? We haven't talked about things like breath work, for example, but again, another one for me is when I turn on my computer every morning, I will take 6 slow, deep breaths. So again, I know what that's doing for me from a nervous system positive perspective, but it's like, oh, I forgot to do my breathing practice. Oh, I didn't do it. But actually, I would turn on my computer every day. So why not just chainmail it on top? So I think that's sort of important as well. So again, in terms of creating healthy habits, that's a really nice tool. I've got lots of other things we could touch on. Exercise is an important one in terms of longevity as well. Interestingly, there's also emotions. So there was a bit of research which was done at Yale University, and what they found is that if you're optimistic and you feel good about yourself as you get older, you add, wait for this, you add 7.5 years to your life. I mean, I find that phenomenal. Just by having that feel good, if you can become that glass half full person, you're adding years to your life. So do that. When something seems really difficult, just ask yourself, how can I look at this in a different way? And there's, again, similar data on purpose. So if you have a reason for getting out of bed every morning, you're adding, again, a similar number. You're adding over 7 years to your life. So imagine that. You just add years to your life just by knowing why you're getting out of bed today. So do that. I say this all the time. When you wake up, smile on your face. And when your feet touch the floor, know why you're getting out of bed today. Set it with a purpose. My purpose for today is to, and then on you go. Set that tone. And you're doing something active to live longer.
And I think, it's an interesting point that you've touched on mental health. And look, our physical health is affected by our mental health and vice versa. And this is so evident in my own journey that I've talked about for years and years and years, and for all the sort of thousands of women who have come to me through the Lassie Lounge Facebook group, that, often when you're going through perimenopause, no matter what's happened up until that point in your life, good or bad, where even if you are living a really healthy lifestyle, that our hormones can massively impact our mental health. And so it's very hard if you're feeling low for no reason at all. I mean, I had a very good life and my health and well-being was pretty good. But if your mood is affected by your hormones, then it can be hard to sort of jump out of bed and say, okay, I will do this and I will do that. So, I always say that if everything that, you've just talked about is sort of ticking all the boxes and you're still feeling pretty rubbish, then it is really important to obviously speak to a menopause specialist or your GP about making sure your hormones are balanced so that you can address this moving forward.
There's something really important there as well, because sometimes women through midlife don't always necessarily know and connect what they're going through to the menopause or the perimenopause. So like you say, if something's not right, then what could be going on? And I come back to sort of biological aging here, because what I found through the host of testing that I've done in terms of testing biological age is it's one of the first things that changes for women as their hormones start to change. So it suddenly helps you to make sense of what's going on. And I've certainly done a number of tests where women's biological ages have been massively higher than their chronological age, but they're not yet thinking they're experiencing any other symptoms of the menopause or going through it. Then you start to analyze the hormones, and yes, they are. So it's one of the first things that changes. So I find it's a really, really good test to do as well, to use your biological age to sort of understand, might be something else going on here. Yes, this could be my hormones changing. Let's have a look at those as well, and then get the support, whether that's around HRT or whether that's around specific changes in your lifestyle that's going to support that. And also back to the sort of the mental health stuff, again, there's this idea of connections and connectivity and belonging and feeling a part and your identity and all of that as you're going through midlife as well. And again, what we know is that connectedness increases longevity. So again, super, super important to sort of just tap into that part of you. You're feeling like you don't belong. You feel like, I talk about feeling like a machine with missing parts, because your kind of identity has just got lost in mother, wife, daughter, all of that, hasn't it? And it's it's a tricky place to be sometimes. But when you're feeling that, again, so important to think about what can I do? Who can I reach out to just increase that connectedness?
100%. And I think the power of community just cannot be understated. So, I mean, before I let you go, I love your approach to health. It's a very, I grew up as a doctor's daughter, and you're absolutely right. It was always about, look, here I am, fix me. I'm not quite working right, so you fix me. But actually, I love your sort of lifestyle first approach. I mean, do you think, doctors, in the future are going to actually be taught about prescribing lifestyle advice first rather than pills and medication first, or are we just going to carry on in this way we've been over the last 50 years or more?
Yeah. And that's a really good question. The tide is definitely turning, because it has to. It really, really has to. So it is. And I think there's always been this sense of lifestyle, but not knowing what to do with it. And it also needs a bigger shift in terms of, if you look at how GP surgeries are set up now to how they were set up when you were the doctor's daughter, for example. Time has always been the thing that is the hardest. In 10 minutes, in the way that the NHS is set up at the moment, it's really, really hard to be able to have those lifestyle interventions at the forefront. So that really needs a shift in terms of being able to kind of spend the time really deep diving into what matters. And I remember my traditional GP time. I'd know everything about my patients because we built that rapport. We got to know each other. I knew where their children went to school. I knew where they were going on holiday. But the one thing I never ever knew to ask was, what matters to you? What's important to you? Because that's your motivation for making lifestyle changes. The pill might feel like the easiest, quickest thing to do. But if you've got high blood pressure, then how long are you going to be able to take those high blood pressure pills without there being a knock-on effect from all of that? And yet here I am. I don't have high blood pressure, but I'm wearing a blood pressure monitor on my wrist because I'm taking charge. I want to know about me, and I want my feel good. So just take it back. So I think, in answer to the question, are things changing? Yes, there is. We've got, lifestyle medicine is now starting to appear on medical curricula. We've got people being trained in lifestyle medicine at a educational level as well. Globally, around the world, lifestyle is starting to take that approach. I think it needs to go deeper, which is, I think for me, it's around the self-care system. And that's what I would like to see much more as well. And back to what I said right at the beginning, is trusting people to use their innate intuition, but also giving them the tools of the time to support that.
Yeah. And I think also learning more about this at school, and all of us being more active. I think we lead very sedentary lives. I think lockdown hasn't helped, but sitting in front of our computers and doing Zooms all day is as you say, actually, while I'm sitting here, perhaps I should, under my desk, be having something, a desk cycler, just.
Well, I'm actually standing right now, Katie. And I'll give you another statistic, which is, if you stand more than you sit, from longevity, you do add years to your life. This is not just I should stand. There's actually sort of data around this. So 3.5 hours is, again, a magic number. If you sit for less than 3.5 hours, you add 2.5 years to the end of your life. So I think that's really important for people to bear in mind, is just, again, ask yourself, can I do this standing up instead, on the Zoom call, on the phone, etc. And the other thing I've got under my desk is dumbbells.
So, actually, I was going to say, a good friend of mine has dumbbells on her couch, and every night when she's watching television, she just sort of starts doing that. Why not?
If we're going to be kind of wrapping up in a bit, I think we've got to make health fun. I've been laughing and smiling through this whole conversation with you, and at the same time, I know I'm doing something for my health. I've been standing, we've been connecting. I'm now doing these crazy dumbbells whilst I'm talking. We've got to have fun with our health, otherwise it's too heavy. And that's back to that whole kind of smart approach, is just, take control of it. That's
Well, that's your lovely parting tips and advice for anyone listening. Mine is to get a standing desk, which I'm now seriously going to consider. But no, we could talk for hours. But thank you so much for coming on and sort of teaching us about this, lifestyle first. And if anybody wants to find out more information about Dr. Patel, we're going to have everything in our show notes. But your website is dralkapatel.com, is that right?
Yes, dralkapatel.com, or drop into my socials at Dr Alka Patel UK. And let's have a conversation. I'm always up for a conversation, and I think it makes such a difference to be able to have someone to speak to with a different approach to what you might be used to. And let's just see if we can have some fun with it.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, and thanks everyone for listening. I hope you found that helpful. Thanks for listening to the Latte Lounge podcast. Please subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss our next episode. For more support with all things menopause and midlife, head to our website, lattelounge.co.uk, and search for the Latte Lounge group on Facebook. This podcast was sponsored by Youth and Earth and produced by Emily Crosby Media.